Hello, everybody, and welcome to Thursday's Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. John Schmeelk, Matthew Citak with you, taking your phone calls at 201-939-4513. Giants and Falcons coming your way on Sunday, 1 o'clock in Atlanta. Giants have 3 games to go. They're trying to break their losing streak, which I have lost count, up to 9 games. So Giants trying to break that. They're at 2-12. Falcons at 7-7 heading into this game, coming off not a pretty Monday night win against the Raiders. I watched that game pretty much beginning to end, and it was a lot of punts. A lot of punts. So a lot to talk about today. We'll go through the injury report for the Giants. We'll get an update from Brian Dable at some point over the course of the show. We'll get that from Dan Salomon up outside with his tweets. And we'll start talking about your opponent a little bit in the Atlanta Falcons. And, of course, we'll get to a lot of your calls, too. So, Citak, first things first, injury report. This is the one from yesterday. A lot of guys looks like they could be on their way back, but let us know what Brian Dable said yesterday, and then we'll update you based on what he says today.
Yeah, so this is probably the lengthiest injury report that we've had so far this season.
More so than last week when we were at 20?
This was 21. So
I think this is the win then. Okay, it's got the win.
So I'll just tell it by who did not participate, who was limited, and then who was full, and then what Coach said about some of the guys that he was asked about. So first for the DNPs, these guys did not participate in Wednesday's practice. Brian Burns with ankle/neck injuries, Patrick Johnson with a knee injury, Bobby Okereke with the back injury, Aaron Stinney is in concussion protocol, and Greg Stroman is dealing with shoulder and shin injuries.
Oh, that was new because I don't think Dable mentioned him in the pre-practice press conference.
He did not, and
yes.
When the injury report was first sent out, Stroman was listed as limited, and then there was a correction sent out a little while later. He actually did not participate at all.
Okay.
So of those guys, Coach said that Brian Burns is considered day-to-day. We've seen Brian Burns play through various ailments throughout pretty much the entire season.
Yep.
So I would think as long as he can get back on the practice field today or tomorrow, would put him in pretty good shape to play. Even if he doesn't, I think there's a chance he could still suit up because he's played through everything so far this season. Patrick Johnson, Coach said he's likely out this week. Yep. With that knee injury. He said it's a little more serious. Wouldn't say how serious, but he said it probably is going to keep him out this week. Bobby Okereke missed the last 2 games with this back injury. Still has been unable to get back on the practice field. Aaron Stinney just got put into the starting lineup with John Runyon on IR. He is now in concussion protocol, and as we've seen with different players this season in the protocol, we have no idea. Darius Slayton was back playing on the field less than a week later. Malik Neighbors missed 2 full games. So that one we'll just have to wait and see what happens throughout the week. And yeah, Greg Stroman, again, we don't really know what his status is other than he was a DNP. Moving on to the limited, which this is where a bulk of the injury report comes into this category. We have Deonte Banks with the rib injury, Dane Belton with the knee, Tommy DeVito in concussion protocol, Corey Durden with shoulder, Cordell Flott with the quad, Art Green, shoulder, Drew Lock, heel/left elbow, Chris Manhertz, ankle, Malik Neighbors, knee/foot, Rakeem Nunez-Roches, neck/shoulder, Drew Phillips, shoulder, Wan'Dale Robinson, shoulder, Tyrone Tracy, ankle. So of those guys, Banks and Flott and Phillips, but all 3 of them missed last week's game. Mm-hmm. Banks has missed, and Flott have missed the last 2 games, or have all 3 of them missed the last 2 games?
Same with Nacho. Nacho's in that group too.
But at least with Banks and Flott, Coach said that he is hopeful that they will be able to return this Sunday. The fact that the 2 of them and Drew Phillips, the fact that they started the week as limited participants gives them at least a chance. Deonte Banks has been limited. He was limited at least last week and obviously did not suit up.
Yeah, Phillips and Nacho, though, they did not practice last week, right?
Phillips and Nacho did not. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they are, limited gives them a shot at least. Tommy DeVito, the fact that was limited on Wednesday, I would say gives him a chance to be able to clear the protocol in time for Sunday's game. And Dable said that if this does happen, he will most likely serve as Drew Lock's backup, which Drew Lock obviously was on the injury report as well. Coach said that he should be okay, and that as long as he doesn't have any setbacks throughout the week, that they intend to have him be the starting quarterback on Sunday, with Tommy DeVito if he clears protocol as his backup, which would then put Tim Boyle back into the third quarterback slot. Of these other guys that were limited, I mean, we've seen Malik Neighbors on the injury report is limited a lot of this season and has not held him out of a game yet, so I would expect he'll still be able to suit up. And yeah, with these other guys, we don't really know the extent to their injuries, but I'd have to think starting the week is limited, that hopefully most of them should be good to go on Sunday. I mean, I guess we'll wait and see what the next 2 days of injury reports look like. And then finally, Deontay Johnson with an ankle and Austin Schlottman with a fibula. They were both full participants. These are the 2 players that have been designated to return from injured reserve. They are both in their 21-day windows. I believe they were both full participants last week as well. So we'll have to wait and see. It likely would be Saturday that one or both of them would get activated to the active roster if it happens. But the fact that they've both been full participants means, at least in terms of health-wise, they probably should be good to go. Whether or not the Giants decide to activate them for Sunday's game remains to be seen.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, quarterback on both sides is the big news this week. Drew Lock, you mentioned on the injury report. He's going to start this week. Tommy DeVito, if he gets back and is well enough, he'll be the backup. And then Tim Boyle will slide back into that third spot. So Drew Lock behind center for the Giants. And the big news, we found out on Tuesday night after we finished our show, Michael Penix into the starting lineup for the Atlanta Falcons after Kirk Cousins looked all sorts of out of sorts on Monday night. Just did not look like himself. I've never seen him.
Wasn't just Monday night. It's been the last
couple weeks.
Few weeks.
You're right, 100%. And you could tell the Falcons had the way they ran their offense, they had very little confidence in the passing game. So we'll get to see Michael Penix, which will be fun. He was a guy we talked a lot about last year during the draft process. So we'll get to see him in his first NFL start, which will add a little bit of spice, a little bit of juice to this game. And the Falcons, look, they got a good offensive line. They got, Bijan is an all-pro level running back. Tyler Argiel is actually a really good backup running back, too. They got weapons outside with, Mooney, McLeod, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. So we'll get to their defense in a second, but this is a huge, huge, huge test for the Giants' defense here against, if Penix plays all right, again, you never know what a rookie quarterback's going to look like in his first start. They have a very, very impressive group on offense that take the field every week.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why coming into the season the Falcons were considered the favorites in the NFC South was, the addition of Kirk Cousins. Everyone thought that would bring some stability to the quarterback position.
I mean, they almost went 500 last year with Desmond Ridder as their quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the fact that they were adding Kirk Cousins to this group of playmakers. Because as you just mentioned, they have talent at every position and multiple guys at just about every position. I mean, Tyler Algier, as a rookie, ran for 1,000 yards. And then the next year they drafted Bijan Robinson, who just crossed 1,000 yards rushing on Monday night for the first time. He's up to over 1,500 yards of total offense. He's third in the NFL behind Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry in terms of yards from scrimmage. Bijan Robinson is amazing. He is one of the best just pure playmakers in the NFL, in my opinion. And their wide receivers, very talented. I mean, Drake London obviously was a top 10 pick a couple years ago. Everyone was predicting this year to be the breakout year because he finally had a quarterback, and we've seen it in flashes. It hasn't been as consistent, but
again, probably because
more of that has
Falcons'
been
passing game hasn't been consistent.
More of that has been because of the quarterback play. Kirk Cousins leads the NFL in interceptions with 16 and 14 games. It's not great. I personally, and I've seen sort of conflicting views from various different media outlets and people, but I personally think Penix is going to be a boost to this offense because, quite frankly, you can't get much worse quarterback play than especially what we've seen from Kirk Cousins the last month.
Yeah, and it's not just that he's been like a game manager, being conservative. There's been a lot of turnovers in there too. So it's not like it's just been like a scaled back version. He's actively hurt the team with some of the passes he's thrown. So I'm with you. Even if Penix makes some rookie mistakes, is it really going to be that many more than what we've had from Cousins the last few weeks? I don't think so.
I'm with you completely. And, I think what kind of sets Penix apart from what your standard normal rookie quarterback is first of all, he's had the benefit of sitting behind Cousins for 14 games now, and while Cousins may not have been playing too well, the type of person and leader that he is, he definitely was kind of showing Penix the ropes.
Did you watch any of Penix's press conference?
I saw clips of it.
Yeah, he mentioned how Kirk Cousins has helped him with things around a half dozen times over the course of his presser.
Yeah. So I fully expect him to step right in and play at least at an adequate level in this first game. And even more so than that, Michael Penix played a lot of college football.
6
He played
years.
6 years,
Yep.
including the last 2 at Washington. He led Washington last year to the college football playoff. This guy has played in big games. He has played with, talent around him. I think that he's going to step right in. I'm not going to say he's going to come right in and, light the world on fire, but I think he's definitely going to provide the Falcons with better quarterback play right out of the gate than what they've been getting from Kirk Cousins.
Look, this is an easy game plan if I'm the Falcons, right? You got a really good offensive line against the team. And you know what? I think I probably, I didn't talk much about the game on the air here with the Giants last week, but when I rewatched it, and you saw Derrick Henry's final run total, the Giants' rush defense is pretty good. When I rewatched the game, in the second half especially, Derrick Henry kind of ran all over him a little bit, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he was just picking up 5-6 yards per carry on most of his carries.
Second half was like 5 to 8 yards on every carry, 100%. Yeah. So, Bijan Robinson, they're going to pound it with him. They're going to pound it with Algier. Then just run a lot of play action with Penix and let him chuck the ball down the field because that's what he does best. He's a deep ball accurate thrower with a big arm, and he's got a big wide receiver in London and a fast wide receiver in Mooney to get the ball to down the field. Run the ball, play action off of that. Try to throw some balls down the field, run some wide receiver screens, stuff like that, get hits on some crossers. Simple stuff for a quarterback that you put him in advantageous situations by letting him run some play action on early downs, but let the run game do a lot of the, dirty work and a lot of the damage. And if I'm the Falcons coming into this game with a rookie quarterback, if I'm Zach Robinson, their offensive coordinator, that's what I do.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, regardless of who's under center, the fact that Bijan Robinson is your starting running back, I feel like that should be your game plan if you're the Falcons, regardless. But I'm with you completely because Michael Penix obviously had a great collegiate career, especially those last 2 years at Washington. If you look, and I'm sure you know this because of the amount of tape that you study heading into the draft.
Sadly, I watched every one of his snaps last year.
Yeah, so last year especially,
and there were a lot of passes. Let me tell you,
he was the best quarterback in the nation with play action passing. Like if you look at his numbers, he was by far and away the leader when it came to play action passes. So I fully expect the Falcons to lean heavily on Bijan and then use that play action to sort of suck the Giants defense in a little bit. And then Penix is definitely going to uncork a few deep balls, which we've seen all season and we've talked about it before. That has been, the Giants' defense has had its struggles, but perhaps his biggest Achilles heel right up there with the run defense has been their inability to stop those deep passes. So I fully expect Penix to take at least a handful of shots deep down the field on some play action passes.
Yeah, that's why it'll be important to see if the Giants can get some of their more experienced defensive backs back on the field because we saw that, I think, hurt them last week. You really sense the loss of Tyler Nubin not playing that center field. One play, Jason Pinnock got put in a really bad spot. He was basically covering a wide receiver in space one-on-one. He got post-cornered on the play. And Adoree Jackson, who I believe was supposed to be in cover 3 on the deep right side of the field, was not there to help him when the guy went from post to corner. And then you had a couple other, I think Isaiah Simmons had one over the middle. I don't know who it was, but there was definitely a missed assignment on that pass out to Justice Hill. That turned into a big play. So there were some mistakes in there. I think Stroman was the one down the seam to Bateman, to Devontae Walker for the touchdown. So there was different mistakes in there from different guys, and I think it's important to try to get some of those guys back on the field. You're not going to get many of your defensive linemen back. Maybe you'll get Nacho back, but Dexter Lawrence ain't walking through the door. DJ Davidson's not walking through the door. So you're gonna have. It doesn't look like Bobby Okereke is playing this week. So you got to make do there, but hopefully you can get. Even if it's, just one of Banks and Flop back, and then you put him with Adoree Jackson, I think that would go a really long way to helping yourself out there in the defensive secondary.
Yeah, I'm with you. And we got some tweets from
what do you got?
Coach's Flyby. This is from the one and only Paul Dottino. He said that Dable said there will be no practice for basically the same group of guys that did not practice yesterday, which is Aaron Stinney, Bobby Okereke, Greg Stroman, Patrick Johnson, Brian Burns.
Mm-hmm.
However, he did say that he expects Brian Burns to play.
Okay.
He even said, yes, he will play.
Any progress from Stinney in the concussion protocol?
Well, the fact that if he's still a DNP would make me think that probably not much progress.
Yeah, probably.
He would then be limited if he had gone to the next step.
The problem is that it all depends on when he got diagnosed, too. Because remember, a lot of times these guys don't get diagnosed on Monday. Like, they'll come back in on Wednesday and like, yeah, I got a headache. And then they'll test him on Wednesday morning. So he might have only gotten diagnosed yesterday, for all we know.
Well, there was no word of a concussion from Aaron Stinney on Sunday.
Yeah, or when Dable talked to the media Monday.
Yeah, when Dable spoke Monday, there was no word either. So you're right. It might have been, Wednesday, or if he came to the facility Tuesday and said his head hurt or something. I don't know. But it is good to hear that Coach Dable said Brian Burns will play. Again, that's kind of what we expected. And then he also just said that there's been no decision or thoughts of shutting Bobby Okereke down for the rest of the season. So it sounds like once he is able to physically get back on the field, he will probably be back out there.
It's getting late fast.
Only 3 games left.
Absolutely. And then where I think the Giants can have some success this week is against this Falcons defense, which just quite frankly is not very good. They don't have any great individual pass rushers. Grady Jarrett and Matthew Judon obviously are big names, but they're not what they used to be. They're older players. They're both over 30 years old. But Judon against Evan Neal is a matchup to watch this week. Jarrett is still a good interior pass rusher on the defensive line. They play a lot of zone. They got A.J. Terrell back there. They got a couple veteran safeties, but they've been vulnerable in the pass game. Like, teams have thrown the ball and then they play a lot of zone defense. So if you're patient, you find the holes in the zone. It's not like last week where you got the Ravens a lot of man-to-man. You're able to kind of throw those deep balls and draw those defensive pass interference penalties. You're probably not going to have as many of those opportunities this week just because of the way the Falcons play. And I'm not sure you want to chuck the ball down the field against Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons, given how good they are playing the ball. But this Falcons defense has been vulnerable all year. So I think you should be able to figure out a way to move the ball and score some points.
Yeah, I'm with you. I will say that they have been a little bit better against the run than the past this season.
Yep.
And I think, having Grady Jarrett right up there up front plays a very big part in that. The pass defense, in terms of yards, ranks 24th in the league. In terms of passing touchdowns, they're 29th. So this is a defense that can be thrown on. I think as long as the Giants' offensive line can give Drew Lock some protection back there, I think Lock will kind of be slinging it like he did those 2 games, the 2 starts that we saw before he suffered those injuries. Just one other defensive player that you did not mention on the Falcons, familiar face, Lorenzo Carter.
Oh,
still there.
That's right. Good point. I forgot
still
about
there.
him.
He missed a couple of games earlier in the season, but he was back. He played on Monday night, so I'd expect him to be on the field this Sunday.
Never quite became the pass rusher we all hope, but he was always a very solid all-around player. Played the run pretty well. Was solid. He ended up being an okay player. Maybe he was with the Giants' 3rd round pick,
Yes.
late 2nd, early 3rd.
I believe 3rd round.
Early 3rd, and he turned out to be an okay player. He's a guy that's been in the league and played for a while.
I feel like he's a good 3rd edge rusher on the team.
I agree. A good rotational edge rusher. And for a 3rd round pick, that isn't bad. And maybe if he didn't have that injury in his career, maybe it could have been a little bit more.
Yeah, no,
than that.
obviously there were some hopes that he could develop into a starting edge rusher, but didn't quite make it there, I would say. But
yeah, I think you're probably right. All right, 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. We'll take your calls right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. And, of course, by the way, folks, if you're not aware of it, we do have a Big Blue Kickoff Live on Saturdays now on the WFAN on the radio at 7 a.m. So if you're up early, you're driving around, going to work or, running some errands, picking up some, food for the kids or whatever, tune in. Sean Morash and I take your calls on the fan, so you can check that out on Saturday morning. You should all go check out the Giants Huddle podcast as well. We have our latest episode up there. Again, it's called the Giants Podcast Network feed, so other stuff pops up there too. So the stuff from this week, me and Paul Dottino talked to Osi Manure and Keith Hamilton. Really fun conversations about Giants history. And the other 2 things that are up there right now too is the Giants Hangout with you, Russ, and Madeline, correct?
Yep.
You want to give a little tease as to what you guys talk about in there?
we talked about the Ravens game and the Falcons' upcoming game.
Way to go outside the box on that.
I don't want to ruin it.
No, that's fine. And then we have draft season just popped up on that feature. Draft season has its own feed, by the way, but it also pops up on our Giants Podcast Network feed. Tony Pauline and I talk about the Heisman. Both of us would have voted for Genty if we had the chance, I think.
Can't blame you there.
Not that Travis Hunter's not phenomenal. It's all a matter of how much credit you want to give to being a 2-way guy. I think Genty's better at what he does than what Hunter is at what he does, but Hunter does more So I think it's just a matter of how you want to balance those two things out. And Genty on the better team. So whatever. I don't have a problem with Travis Hunter winning. I think very well deserved, but I would have personally voted for Genty. We talked about some of the underclassmen that have decided to come out. Some of the underclassmen that have decided not to come out. We heard from 2 quarterbacks this week. Penn State quarterback Drew Aller that decided to stay back in, and Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. I think smart move by both guys. I think if they continue to improve, they could be first-round picks next year. Not sure they would have been first-round picks this year, so I think good move by those 2 guys going back, and then a bunch of underclassmen have come out. And we'll preview the college football playoffs a little bit. That'll be fun. Dan Salamone
starts tomorrow night.
He's sweating bullets up there.
Oh, yeah.
Very nervous. The lack of confidence from the Ohio State contingent after that loss to Michigan is palpable.
You can't blame him.
No, I can't, I guess.
That's what losing to Michigan will do to you.
Ryan Day has had a lot of success against every team not named Michigan over the course of his tenure there. Yeah. Congratulations on Vanderbilt's quarterback coming back, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Diego Pavia.
Year 9?
One more year, baby.
Year 9, you're up to that? What is it?
Sued the NCAA and won. That's a pretty big decision just in terms of college football landscape in general, because now it's basically saying that your years at a JUCO, junior college, doesn't count towards your eligibility.
So is that like the universal decision they made?
Yep.
That is a big deal.
He sued them, and this was like a Tennessee, I think it was a state court.
Oh, it was a state court, really? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
This ruling, yeah.
I wonder if the NCAA is going to appeal that.
I've read they are not happy with that decision.
I'm sure they're not. And the NCAA usually will appeal if that happens. But congratulations.
We'll take the one more year of Diego.
Are they going to celebrate his 30th birthday at like halftime of the game next year or something like that? No.
You mean halftime of the Birmingham Bowl we're playing in coming up.
Who do you have?
Georgia Tech in the Birmingham Bowl.
Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt, similar colors.
Yeah.
I always get those schools confused actually because they,
It's fair.
They look very similar.
Yeah. One less injury update that Dan Salamone just added, and that is that Tommy DeVito will do more today than he did yesterday. He's moving along in the protocol, and Coach said, I think he'll be available again as the backup to Drew Lock.
That's tremendous. Good to have Tommy there as the backup. And then Tim Boyle, by the way, did a really yeoman's work. He did a nice little job in that game last week. Especially when I rewatched the tape, I'm like, he's throwing with anticipation into small windows, like down the field. I was really impressed with Tim Boyle when I rewatched the game.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I can't remember if I said this with you on Monday or with Paul on Tuesday, but Tim Boyle threw with anticipation, I would say, better than any Giants quarterback we've seen this season, at least.
I would not necessarily disagree with that, to be
just
honest
in terms of that one attribute, not overall, because obviously when Daniel Jones was here, he had some good games. Drew Lock has had some flashes, but just in terms of throwing with anticipation, I mean, there were at least a few balls where he threw it before the wide receiver was even out of their cut, and the ball was just sitting there waiting. As soon as like Malik turned around, it was right there.
The one in the cover 2 hole where you got it right behind the corner in front of the safety. There was some really impressive throws in there. I was color me impressed by what we saw out of Tim Boyle. He's been a backup a long time. He knows how to, even when maybe not knowing a playbook for that long, how to step in real quick and do kind of that type of stuff. So good job, Tim Boyle. I was pretty impressed by that. All right, 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. Hashtag Giants Chat on Twitter. Thank you for being with us on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Just a reminder on next week's schedule. I know Madeline and Sean spoke about being on Christmas Eve next week. Pearson knocked them both out with a baseball bat after the show and said, no. You will not be on Christmas Eve next week. Sorry. No, there's just, all jokes aside, there was just a miscommunication. So Madeline, I believe, will be on Monday. I don't know who she's going to be on with yet. It could be Sean O'Hara. We'll see. But she'll be on Monday. We will have no shows Tuesday or Wednesday next week. And then we'll be on Thursday and Friday as usual as we get ready for Giants and Colts, which will be on Sunday, by the way. It will be a Sunday 1 o'clock game. There was some question as to when that game was going to be played. The NFL did not set that schedule until Tuesday afternoon. So that'll be Giants and Colts on Sunday at 1. So it will not be to the day anniversary of the greatest game ever played. It'll be one day off. I'm sure they'll make a big deal about that during the game regardless. All right, let's go to Rocco on Long Island. He's going to lead us off today. Hi, Rocco.
Hey, guys. I usually end up calling after the draft because, that seems to be the most exciting time now for the Giants.
Sadly, Rocco, that has been the case over the past 10 years.
But I actually did speak to you, John, and I actually told you how I liked this draft class, and they definitely, a lot of them definitely proved their worth, and it has been pretty good. But just a couple of points on these previous drafts and the kids that they drafted this year on why I just feel this team has failed. A lot of people talk about Evan Neal, which I actually don't even see it. Every national scout had him at one point even the number one player in the nation.
In fact, Rocco, the funny thing in that draft, you go back to when we were at the Combine and did our Combine shows, so that would have been, 2022,
Yep.
right? The 2022 winter. And I'm sure you're a big draft guy. I'm sure you're listening to our shows at the Combine. There was a debate. Well, is it going to be Kayvon Thibodeau, Aiden Hutchinson, or Evan Neal that's going to be the top overall pick? That was the debate at the Combine. And the Giants got two of those guys at 5 and 7.
Yep, and that's why you can't knock the Giants or their department for taking them, because almost every team in the league would have. And there's still some to see. You can't, you can't just throw him out the window here. He's still young, but you build championship teams, guys. Not, those first round picks. Odds are you're going to get a good player. They're not all going to be great, but the way you build these teams are in the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth round. Those are premium picks in this league. You build starters. You build a team that way, and you're not gonna drafting a Zudu, drafting McKeithen. I don't know what the thought process was in the Zudu and then making him a tackle, but I think he was a third-round pick.
He was.
Just watching the league, this team, watching football for decades now. You're at positional value in the third round. You get a guard. You make sure he's the best guard you can get, and you make him a guard. You don't play around with it, and you don't get too cute with that type of player in that pick. So I don't know if the pick is a failure or the team has failed the Zudu in not making him play that position. That's one point. The McKeithen pick, again, I think he was a fifth-round pick. I understand. I still don't know what he was, a tackle, a guard.
No, he was a guard. And McKeithen did a little bit of work at tackle, but he was trading primarily as a guard.
I just feel like in those spots, you can do a lot better with those picks. Guys, championship teams are built with those picks. You get David Deal in the fifth round. You get Ahmad Bradshaw late in the draft. You get these players. You got to find them. You can't be too cute with them. And I really think those are the type of things in the draft that people should be upset about, and how these players were used.
Now, Rocco, I will say this. You're right. Over the past, if you want to take the long view of things, right? You want to go back to as far as 2013 when things started really going sideways, right? The Giants' mid-round picks have not really contributed a whole lot. That was a big problem, especially in that 2013 to 2018 range, which kind of messed this whole thing up and started this downfall process in a lot of ways. I will say this though, and again, he's been hurt a lot. When he's been healthy, I think Cordell Flott's been pretty good, and I think Micah McFadden's been pretty good as a guy that's contributed inside linebacker. So I think those are two guys under the Joe Schoen regime that they have hit on in those middle rounds.
Yes, and I do agree with you there. But some of these other players, some people, I'm not as high on some players as others. I remember a couple of years ago, I spoke to Lance and Paul about Wan'Dale Robinson. Listen, I like the kid. He's a tough kid. He catches, he does what he has to do. But in my personal opinion, early on, too, seemed like he was dazed all the time when he got hit. He got concussed a few times. But in my personal opinion, I don't see it, guys. He goes down so easily with just single arm tackles by one. If it was up to me, I'm not saying cut the guy. I'm saying I think he's almost better off being a fourth receiver on this team. I'd rather have Slayton get another outside receiver and use Neighbors in the majority on the inside, and use Wandell as the fourth receiver.
Now I got to be honest with you, I can't be too hard, Rocco, on the Wandell pick because I was parroting and paddling the table to draft Sky Moore that year, and that has not exactly worked out for the Kansas City Chiefs either. Now, for some reason, Sky Moore forgot how to catch the ball. I don't know when that happened, because he did not drop the ball in college, but he has not been able to catch the ball since he got into the pros. I don't understand.
But you know what? Honestly, no one even had Wandell Robinson, on their radar. You never heard of him. It's just, these are some of the things that I see that sometimes, are currently not really working well for them. And honestly, guys, the team is young. And I think on a coaching end, some of the mistakes have been, you have a young team, which is great. Sometimes it's a good thing, but not always a good thing. You've made it younger by the coaching decisions. For instance, I called you early last year, John, and I told you I love Theo Johnson. I thought it was a great pick. I see Theo Johnson being a starter for this team for a long time. But in my personal opinion, tight ends, they don't enter the league and just do what they got to do right away.
Tight ends take time to develop, Rocco. You're right about that.
And Dable put him in too early, where I feel Bellinger should have gotten the majority of the snaps that he was getting early on. And maybe as the season progressed, you use Theo more. But this team is young. You have a lot of pressure on these young guys to stand out when it doesn't happen like that. They need more veteran presence. You need a veteran to be more of a veteran presence to work alongside Banks. I know he's had a bad year. Maybe it's the scheme that they're in. But even everything that's happened to this team has really it's failed, and it's failed the players. From Daniel Jones on, Daniel's never had an offensive line. Daniel had an offensive line in the beginning of the year this year for a little bit, but other than that, he was already destroyed, sketchy. It was over for him. But even Neighbors, even people saying, oh, yes, he finally has the number one receiver. Neighbors is not a number one receiver right now. He's a rookie. It's too much pressure on young guys, and when you're putting more young guys to start, it's not helping the situation. It's progressed badly for them. They need more veteran presence on this team, and I think that would help in the long run. And it would just, I don't think losing McKinney and Barkley is the problem, because McKinney, he's a great player, but spending that money on a safety is not the right thing to do. And when you draft a guy like a Tyler Nubin, who, he's probably had a similar season to McKinney when he was a rookie. So I think those aren't the problem. It's some of these decisions and some of these later round picks that have just been failures. Every action has a reaction. And if you had hit on the Azudu pick, you wouldn't have to spend money on signing Runyon this past year. It's just, and then you could have taken that money and used it elsewhere. But it's just some of these decisions and routes that they've gone it's really all just come to to this right that we have right now, and that's really I could go on and on, guys,
Rocco,
about it, but
I get it, Rocco.
So much.
No, appreciate the call, man. Good stuff. I could tell you thought a lot about this. I remember your draft calls. You're great on the draft. Appreciate the call. Good stuff. In terms of mid-round guys, you mentioned Theo Johnson. I think you feel good about him moving forward. Tyrone Tracy, I think you obviously a fifth-round pick. You feel great about him as being a starter moving forward. And, last year, you didn't have a fourth-round pick because you traded up to get Hyatt, right? So can Hyatt and Schmitz beginning to develop more? And look, when he talked about veteran players, and I don't think this is necessarily what the Giants did, but we warned people over the summer where you can't depend on rookies to be the guys to elevate your team, right? They're rookies. They're rookies for a reason. If they're very talented, it's hard to have the rookies be the centerpiece of what you do. The key for the Giants' success this year to have those guys that have been drafted over the last 3 seasons to take that next step and become the foundation of the team. Injuries came up, other things didn't work out where that didn't come together necessarily. But look, I think you are going to get more veterans in here. You got older and more veteran on the offensive line this past offseason. That helped that position group. You're going to have a lot of money to spend in free agency. But I think it is important to get the young guys on the field and get them snaps early. Could the team have been helped by a few more guys with more experience being out there this year? Maybe. But I don't think it's to the point where you're, getting into the playoffs or anything like that. So is it more valuable to get the young guys the snaps? I think there's a really good argument for that. So that's the way I look at it, at least.
Yeah. Well, first, just about, the Theo Johnson playing right away. I mean, going into the season, obviously, the Giants were trying to win every game. They still are, but from the beginning of the season, obviously there was inside the building hopes to, push for a playoff spot. Obviously, that's what every team across the league.
They thought Theo was their best option.
Theo Johnson, clearly the coaching staff believed was their their best tight end. Otherwise, he would not have been starting from day one.
Yeah, this wasn't a just start him because he's our draft pick situation. That's not what they were doing.
I'm with you. I can understand that, thinking like, maybe long term throughout his career, maybe it would benefit him to learn a little bit first. But when you're trying to win football games, you're going to put your best players out there. And clearly, Theo Johnson coming into the season was the team's best tight end. So I can't fault the coaching staff for putting him out there right away. He had some bumps along the road, especially at the start of the season. But prior to that foot injury, he was really starting to come along and play some good football. Less drops than the beginning of the season, and he was growing and becoming a better player. So I can't fault the coaching staff for that. And just then going back to the 22 draft, which everyone loves to focus on this draft. And I get it. It was the current regime's first draft. It's year 3 of those players now.
And you also had 2 top 10 picks. So obviously it's very important to hit on
I
those.
fully understand the focus on that draft class. And I've said this every time that someone's called up and brought up the draft picks made. You look at that draft, the overall draft, all 250 whatever players that were taken, 262, there are just not that many players that you feel great about now in year 3 across the entire NFL. So the fact that the Giants, you talked about the mid-round picks, as you mentioned, Flott, I still feel like could be a solid corner. He may not be that number 1 shutdown corner, but I don't think he was drafted with that as the expectation for him. I still think he could be a solid corner. You have Micah McFadden, who took a huge step this year and I think solidified his role as one of the 2 starting inside linebackers next year. He keeps getting better each year. You have Dane Belton as a 4th-round pick who obviously has not gotten a ton of playing time, and especially with Tyler Nubin coming in this year, saw his playing time take a hit. But this past Sunday, in his first or second extended action of the season, because he had one other game earlier in the year, had one of his best games. Was all over the field. Granted, it wasn't a perfect game, but one of his better games. And he has 3 more games now to close out the season to show that he, potentially be a part of the team's plans for the, a starting safety role next year potentially, because Jason Pinnock is going to be a free agent. So I don't think in that draft class in particular, obviously there were some misses. Darian Beavers is not on the team anymore. Marcus McKeithen is not on the team anymore. Not every one of those picks were hits, but even, focusing on Joshua Ezeudu, go back and look at the players that were selected after Joshua Ezeudu, and especially the offensive line, because as we all remember, going into that draft, offensive line was the number 1 priority. And we knew that they were going to spend multiple of their draft picks on offensive linemen. You look at the offensive lineman that was selected after Ezeudu at pick number 67, I don't think there's a single one that you're like, wow, the Giants should have gone in that direction instead. Not a single one of those guys have really shown that much. And especially because you already took an offensive tackle in the first round in Evan Neal, so the focus was probably going to be more on an interior guy. None of those interior linemen after him have really shown much at all. So, again, it's easy to look back 2.5 years later and be like, I can't believe they wasted a pick on that guy. But when you even doing that and you look at some of the alternatives, it's not like the alternatives were that much better. And that's even with looking at it in hindsight.
And by the way, the alternative everyone throws out there for Evan Neal, Ike Ekwonu's a guy that has struggled too. He has not had a great start to his career. And then Charles Cross is the other guy who had never played right tackle before. One of the reasons a guy like Evan Neal, I think, was more attractive is because he did have a full season playing right tackle at Alabama. So he was the guy that had played on the other side. Charles Cross had not. He came from a pass-heavy offense where it was all pass sets. There wasn't a lot of, run blocking in that system. So, was everything perfect? Of course not.
No.
Shane has said not everything was perfect. But I think you do have to look at it as a whole and just, you have to look at the draft and see how it went. And just in terms of how that draft was and what it looked like when all was said and done. And you kind of like, all right, Maybe it was just one of those classes where there was not just a ton of great players. Now, obviously, there's always one or two guys there that you could have picked, but you could say that for any other team in the National Football League. So,
yeah, and you brought up
just the way it goes.
And you brought up the Evan Neal and Charles Cross pick, and I had our friend from Maine reach out on Twitter and call me out because the other day I said, well, what did you want the Giants to do if you weren't taking Neal?
Now, Charlie was, I will give Charlie credit, before the draft that year, he was on the Charles Cross bandwagon. He was.
That's fair, and I totally believe that. But in terms of Evan Neal, Ekwonu, and Charles Cross, Charlie might have been the only one that had Charles Cross number one of those three, because it was pretty consensusly agreed upon that it was Evan Neal and Ekwonu, and you could put those two in whatever order you wanted, and then a gap before you got to Charles Cross. So again, 2.5 years later, it's easy to look back and say the Giants should have taken Charles Cross, because at least to this point, and especially this season, Charles Cross has looked the best of those three. But at the time, if the Giants had taken Charles Cross over Evan Neal or Ekwonu, everyone would have been criticizing them, saying, I can't believe the Giants took him over those other two guys. Neal is such a sure thing. So again, it is a lot easier looking back in hindsight and saying, should have done this, we should have done this, we would be here now if we had done this. But I do these articles for Giants.com every year after the draft of expert grades.
Oh, and you also track every mock draft leading up to the draft. So no one has more feel for what people are saying more than you do.
And let me tell you, the Giants have gotten so much praise after each of these last three drafts from people that know way more than me, because I'm not the one that's going out there and grading these draft classes. I'm talking about the Dane Bruglers, the Matt Millers, the Mel Kipers of the world. Those guys were all applauding the Giants draft classes. So hindsight, it's easy to look back and say you should have done this, but I can't fault the front office for the picks that were made, because at the time, almost everyone agreed on those picks and applauded them for those picks. It's easy to look back and with revisionist history and say what could have been.
Hey, look, there are some people view things different ways, right? Some people see it, all right, well, these are the results. That's the only thing that matters.
And that's fair. It is a results business.
Correct.
I fully understand that.
But there is the process behind it that's important too, right? Like even if you have a good process, it doesn't mean your results are always going to be good, right? That's just the way it goes. And you hear every coach always say, well, it's about the process. It's not about the results. So that's something that everyone has to take into consideration, which it's tough for people on the outside too. Look, I get it, guys. I'm not criticizing at all. Trust me, I get the frustration. I wish
we're all frustrated.
I wish the team was better too. But you guys don't see that process from the outside looking in, right? All you see is what the results are. So that's why you base your opinion on that. Totally understand it. I totally get that. And the results have not been good enough. Totally understand that too. But if the process is good, then you hope the results will soon follow. We have an open line, by the way, if you guys want to get in and chat with us at 201-939-4513. We got about 12 minutes here before we bid you adieu. So you excited for the new game show element added to the Pro Bowl competition? Have you heard about this?
I saw the announcement this morning, but quite frankly, I did not actually read through it.
I just clicked the link now, so I'll tell you what it's all about, apparently.
I did not know there was a game show element.
So they're going to have their usual challenges like tug-of-war, dodgeball. Quarterbacks will try to hit some targets down the field. So the new additions this year to the Pro Bowl games, and I have a proud record of not having watched the Pro Bowl in nearly 20 years now, and I hope to continue that streak this year. The only one I watched is the one that I had to go and I had to cover it when Odell Beckham made the Pro Bowl as a rookie. And I watched that Pro Bowl, the only Pro Bowl I've watched in like the last 20 years. Dottino gets mad all the time because shockingly, Paul loves the Pro Bowl and wants it to be like a real football game. So this like flag football thing, he's not happy with it at all, which I enjoy getting on him about. So the two new additions this year apparently will be something called Helmet Harmony. That's the name of the game show. A game show that will test players' knowledge of their teammates. And then also a punting competition where a punter, this one I like, and a non-punter from each team will have to try to place punts in different areas of the field.
Interesting.
And that'll be a competition. So that could be fun.
I like that one. The first one, I'm not so sure about.
And then this is the other portion here. So quarterbacks will have 40 seconds to hit targets at various distances around the field, with each target worth different point values. So this is the part that I guess is new. Before the challenge, the quarterbacks will select a Pro Bowl games teammate to answer 5 trivia questions about current Pro Bowl players. For every correct answer, the quarterback gets an additional 10 seconds to try to hit the target.
Okay. We're trying some new stuff out, and I guess trying to find something that makes more people tune into the Pro Bowl.
Yeah. There'll be a catching challenge, so a wide receiver, tight end, and defensive back from each conference will compete in an obstacle course, including catches from a jugs machine at 3 different distances to test every aspect of catching the ball. So you got a relay race again. You pushing a sled for some of the big guys. Then of course you can have the flag football game with Peyton and Eli back as the 2 head coaches.
Love that they're coming back to coach again.
They have fun with
that.
it.
That adds a little entertaining element to it, at least for us.
The one thing with Bill Belichick going to North Carolina, I'm gonna miss him not being on the first half of the Manning cast. Even if I wasn't at home, I would literally record that on my DVR and watch it just to try to learn from Bill Belichick. I mean, just imagine, and this is what I like to tell people, and I know we got a call just came in, but let me just say this quick. Imagine if we all went in a time machine to like 2010, and I told you that you would have a football broadcast 15 years later where it would just be Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, and Bill Belichick on a show together chatting about a Monday Night Football game, and you can just listen to their conversation.
While all 3 are also sitting on a couch in their homes.
Yes. It's when you think of it that way, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean,
crazy.
I love when he sees like coaching or player mistakes and he gets angry, like even though he's like had nothing to do with the team, he's just hates seeing bad football.
Well, Peyton's the same way with like bad quarterback play. That gets him going a little bit. But the best one, there was a delay a game. I think it wasn't. What was the Monday night game before this last one when you had the 2 home games? I'm trying to remember. One of the teams had a delay of game at home or something like that, or it was a false start. Maybe it was both on different plays. And Bill Belichick is seeing you shake his head. Can't have that at home. Can't do that at home. At home, a delay of game at home, a false start at home. And you could just tell he was so furious. You know who I feel bad for? Those poor, 18-year-olds showing up to North Carolina and they, start making some of these little mistakes. Bill Belichick's going to have 0 patience for that.
Oh, yeah. On the flip side, you get to learn from the greatest coach of all time.
That is
one
true.
of the greatest coaches.
That is true. As long as you don't get stuffed so far into his doghouse that you never actually
That is a good point.
get on the field. Yeah, I think Bill's going to have to lower his threshold for getting very upset at some of these guys because they're 18-year-old kids, especially the freshmen.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just is what it is. All right, let's go to Mac in Maryland. Mac, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, guys?
What's up?
Mac.
I just wanted to call in and talk and ask a question, actually.
Sure.
Coming from the standpoint, from a fan's point, I recognize that you guys work with these guys and you guys work with people that are in charge, but I just wanted you guys, if you could put your fan hat on for a second, I would ask you, what have Shane or Dabo done in draft or in free agency in the past 2.5, 3 years that would make you say, you know what, I feel confident that, even with the way this year turned out, I feel confident that if we secure the 1 or 2 picks, we'll pick the right person. All of our draft picks in those rounds will be high draft picks, and I am confident that these 2, or this one will get it right, and it will translate. Shane will get it right, and the plays will be translated coming out of the coaching on the field. Because coming from a fan standpoint, I think it's very easy to say, oh, the fans want blood and fans want people fired and they're paying for banners and, fans are just out of control. And if you listen to the fans, you'll be sitting with the fans. And I can get that perspective. But I just wanted to ask, if you could just put the fans' hat on for a second, what can you confidently, or the word that everyone loves to use, with conviction, say that they have done that you would feel confident and be convicted have conviction in their picks going forward?
No, Mac. By the way, just and just for the record, fans have every right to be upset and for
sure.
wanting changes, like I get that. If I came off as criticizing fans for that, that was not my intention. You guys have every right to be upset and every right to want changes. I totally get that and get it. So we'll steelman this argument for you as best we can. All right, we'll try to make the best case we possibly can. And again, Mr. Mara, Mr. Tish, those two families will make this decision after the year. You know, we're not getting involved in any of that. But we will steelman this argument as per your request, all right? This would be my best argument, okay? If you still believe in Brian Daboll as an offensive mind, do you believe you're going to be able to find a better offensive mind if you decide to move on from him as a head coach this offseason? Look at the guys that are out there. If you're going to prioritize, you're drafting a quarterback theoretically. I don't know if you're going to want an offensive head coach, but you certainly want a good offensive mind with that quarterback, whether it's your OC or your head coach, right? If you still think Brian Daboll is an elite offensive mind in this league, and you believe in that, do you think you could find someone that you trust more to train this next quarterback, right? Look, Ben Johnson has been very clear. He's not just going anywhere, right? And then after that, you've kind of picked the McVay tree clean. Like, there aren't many apples left on that tree. What, maybe Liam Cohen from Tampa Bay? I think it's a little early for Zach Robinson. He just got started. Like, you know, Bobby Slowick was the hot name last year. Then all of a sudden, their offenses fell apart this year. So I think the bloom's off that rose a little bit. You can go to the Bills offensive coordinator from LSU in Carolina, whose name is
Joe Brady.
Joe Brady's another guy I guess you could think about. So that's one thing. Do you still believe in Brian Daboll as an offensive mind? All right. And as a coach, despite the fact that these last two seasons have been really bad in terms of results, guys have continued to play hard for him. So you could tell he knows how to talk to the players. He knows how to keep the locker room engaged. He knows how to keep these guys playing hard. And if he believes he's still the best offensive mind that you can get that's out there, why would you want to replace him? Okay? So that's how I look at it from a coach's perspective. Then I'll go to Shan. What do you want to add in terms of Daboll?
I mean, I think you nailed it on the head pretty much. I'll just add that I know it was 2 seasons ago at this point, but let's not forget this guy. He did win Coach of the Year in his first season, and that's not an award that they just hand to anybody. He took a team that had such low expectations and led them to a playoff victory, the first one in a decade. And I get it. That was 2 seasons ago. This is a business, or what have you done for me lately? And I get that. But as we've all seen, it's not like he's had a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball to work with.
And no other team has had to play 7 quarterbacks over the past 2 years.
And especially, exactly, you beat me to it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's all good. And especially at the most important position.
Right.
And look, I get it, because we've been hearing this counter argument for at least a year and a half now. This current regime was the ones that decided to bring Daniel Jones back and give him that contract.
And they were also the ones that decided to move on from him halfway through this year too.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So in that regard, I would say, I don't want to say that they've learned from their mistake, but they realized that was not the answer. He was not going to be a part of the future. So let's move on, kind of start fresh. But Daniel Jones was coming off a season, and again, the first playoff win in over a decade. Granted, his numbers were not amazing in 2022, but one of the biggest knocks on him prior to the 2022 season was his inability to protect the football. And rightfully so, because this first, 4 years, 3 years, whatever, way too many turnovers. But in that 2022 season, with Brian Daboll coaching him, led the NFL in interception percentage, the lowest one. And not only was the lowest one in the league, it was the lowest in Giants franchise history. And so they gave him that extension thinking, okay, hopefully we've now solved the turnover part. Now, while his, passing numbers didn't jump off the page by any means, I think we all know that he didn't have the best offensive line or playmakers around him. So I think the thought was, if we hopefully have the turnover part figured out, if we can improve the situation, that is going to help him take that next step. And if he had, let's say I know it didn't happen, but if he had taken that next step in his development that last year or this year, then the contract that they signed him to would have looked fairly reasonable.
It would have been fine
for a quarterback of his level. Now, again, he did not take that step with the improved offensive line and improved playmakers. So that is why he's no longer the quarterback here. But I don't think it's like that crazy to like understand why they thought that he would take that next step given better circumstances around him.
And we don't want to relitigate 2022, but we knew the difficulties with the franchise tag, how much salary cap room that would take up, the Saquon Barkley decision, and for a first-year GM, after a team won a playoff game for the first time since 2011, to like say, all right, well, I'm not going to blow this whole thing up now and just start over. It's just not a realistic situation.
No, and there would have been so many fans if the Giants had decided to blow everything up after that playoff run that would have been so angry.
Now, you could have structured those contracts differently, and Joe Shane said he would have gone back and done things differently, obviously. So now, in terms of the draft, this is where I'll kind of take the next step for you. And again, we're just steel manning this argument because this is what you asked us to do. Whatever happens, right? So in terms of the draft, and you can go back, you can go listen to the shows if you want. Heading into these drafts, the players the Giants drafted were the guys that I wanted them to target. All right? I thought their draft strategy and approach was smart. Were they all perfect? Like, was I, banging the table for Wan'Dale Robinson in the second round that year? I wasn't. But that was one of the few guys I thought was, I wasn't all over heading into these drafts. Heading into that first draft, you would have told me they would have gotten Evan Neal and Kayvon Thibodeau in the first. I would have been like, heck yeah, that's a great draft. I would have been thrilled with that before the draft even started. The following year, Tay Banks was the guy that I wanted to fall to the Giants. And going into the draft, we had the conversation. I'm like, it's not going to happen. Like, they're not going to get him. It's too bad. He'd be perfect. They got the guy I wanted them to get. Second round, John Michael Schmitz is a guy that I didn't think was worthy of a late first-round pick, but other people in the draft industry certainly did, based on mock drafts. So I thought he was a second-round pick. They got him in the late second round that year. Good value. All right? So I was happy with what they did there. This year, heading into this draft, Malik Neighbors was my guy. That's the guy I wanted them to draft. I was excited about that, right? Tyler Newman had a second-round grade for me. Andrew Phillips had a third-round grade for me. So Tyrone Tracy's turned out to be a good pick. I liked him as a sleeper running back. So they value premium positions. They attack those premium positions with picks. They attack free agency to make sure you get better up front in terms of how they want to build the team makes sense to me. I think the strategy makes sense. The types of guys and players they've targeted in the draft makes sense to me. And they made sense before we saw the results, right? I'm basing this based off the process and their thought process and how they've gone about their business. Before they made the picks, I was advocating for them to do what they ended up doing. So that's why I think even though the results have not been there, and I get it, guys, the results have not been there. I think the process they've gone about making these picks on how they want to build this team does make sense. Now, in the end, ownership could look at this and say, no, the process is great, but the results aren't good enough, and that's all that matters. Okay, fine. But process over results is the way a lot of not just teams, but businesses run, right? You have to go about your business the right way, and eventually good things will happen if your process is correct. So that's, I think, my best steel man argument for why... the best argument for why you would want to bring this regime back. And again, I'm not advocating either way. I'm just steelmanning the argument the way he said it, right? Dabes and Joe, I love these guys. I think they're very smart football people. But we're not here to try to tell people what they should do. That's my best steelman in terms of the front office.
Yeah, I think you nailed a lot of good points. I guess the only thing I will add that you didn't mention, and especially because, as we all know, the Giants, as of right now, are heading towards one of the top picks in the draft. And with quarterback being a need, there is at least a strong possibility that the Giants decide to take a quarterback. And the reason why I would, again, for the sake of what the caller said for this argument, would have confidence that Brian Daboll and Joe Shane will be able to identify which quarterback to take. Because if you go back to the now well-talked-about Hard Knocks show, there were numerous clips of Brian Daboll and or Joe Shane trying to move up in the draft or expressing a desire to move up in the draft in order to take Jaden Daniels or Drake May. And obviously it didn't end up happening because those two teams said, no, we do not want to trade up or trade down. We want to take those guys ourselves. But those two guys look like they could be the best two quarterbacks in the draft.
Could be.
Bo Nix obviously is having a good year, but I would certainly put those two at the top.
In terms of how they've played this year.
In terms of
I
how they
agree with
played
that.
this year. Obviously, Caleb Williams could still have a very bright future. But
I agree with you on that too.
in terms of how they played this year and going into the draft, you know this, Jaden Daniels was my number one quarterback.
He was.
I
That's true.
love Jaden Daniels, and he's shown why.
He has
throughout
slowed
this
down a
season.
bit the second half of the year.
But dealing with that rib injury.
Sure,
He looked a lot
absolutely.
better coming out of the bye this past week. So that would be my argument, that we saw what, Brian Daboll puts these quarterback prospects through in their interviews, and seeing that, it gives me faith that if they were to be here, the ones making the decision on this draft pick, and the Giants do decide to take a quarterback, that they would be able to identify which guy could help bring this franchise into this hopefully next more promising phase of New York Giants football, because that is the position that the Giants obviously need to figure out as the number one priority. It is the most important position in sports. And I personally believe that they would be able to pick the right guy. I really do think so. I think Brian Daboll especially knows what he can work with and knows the type of quarterback he can work with if he has the intelligence to run the system that he wants to run. And so that would be just adding to the argument.
Right, and then I think the other part of it too, and I'll leave it here. They've really completely restructured this entire front office and scouting staff. Like, it's from when Joe Shane got here, there's very few. There are some people, scouts that they brought over, that are really good scouts, but it's a lot of new people up there, right? So if you want to make that change, it's starting from scratch in so many ways again. Which, does that set you back again? Make you figure things out again? New processes again? It's a challenge, right? And there's no guarantee the new people you get would be better than the guys you have now. You know what I mean? And obviously, they could be better. Who knows? Like there's no way to know that. But just the idea of resetting that whole thing upstairs again after Joe Shane has built it up over 3 years, I think that's daunting too. That's another huge organizational shift in just 3 seasons, which is something that I'm sure teams don't want to go through if they could avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, we hear all the time across the NFL, whether it's players, coaches, GMs, owners, talk about the importance of continuity.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, being able to continue after having positive results is the ideal scenario. But,
Correct.
The only last thing I would like to say is I appreciate the way that last caller phrased his question.
No, I thought it was great. I thought it was a great question.
I think he understands where we are sitting in our seats. We are unfortunately cannot look at and judge these situations simply as fans. We are Giants employees. So we are never going to sit up here, whether it's a coach, GM, a player, we're never going to sit up here and advocate for someone that works in this building to lose their job.
Yes,
it's just simply never going to happen. So I appreciate the way that the caller just phrased it. As you mentioned, this is not a decision that we have even the slightest bit of say about.
No
one cares what we think.
No, that's correct.
But
and no one wants to hear what we think either. By the way.
No one does. But I think you guys all know this already. But we're never going to sit up here and advocate for anyone to lose their jobs.
Right.
It's just we have to walk out of this room and could run into Brian Daboll 30 seconds later. So
100%. But you guys are free to call up and express your opinions.
You guys
Otherwise,
call in and say
please.
whatever you'd like.
And we're happy to listen to you.
Just don't get mad at us when
No
we
question,
don't say,
Correct.
yes, we agree with you. Get rid of everyone. Like, that's just never going to happen.
But as you well know, we're open game. What's wrong? What's gone wrong? Wrong with the team? All that
we
stuff.
Try to
we
keep
talk
it
about
as
all
honest
that.
as possible.
That is correct. Absolutely. Good stuff, Citak.
Yeah.
I want to test out a nickname, Pearson. How do you think about Citacular for Citak?
I think
we can workshop it a little bit.
I don't think I've gotten that one before.
Pretty good. Citacular? It's not bad.
I'll try and think on that.
What's up, Citacular? How about that? It's pretty good.
It's longer, though.
It is, yeah. So
it's true.
it is longer. So maybe, yeah. I mean, Yeah, it is longer, but it's pretty good. Citak's tough to work into things. It's like Schmeelk. It's hard.
You could just stick with Citak then.
It's boring. All right, good stuff, guys. Tomorrow it is Citacular and Datino coming to you at 12:30 for Friday's show.
The Tonkulus?
What?
I don't know. I was trying to come up with another nickname.
It's pretty good. Like Salamona's Salami. Like that's his nickname. That works.
That's an easy one.
Oh, I know it is.
It's also easier to say salami than Salamone.
Same number of syllables.
That's true.
Citacular is longer.
Pearson's mad that we went over.
No, I know. Well, we did start 5 minutes late.
That's true.
Giants total this week, by the way. The preview will be coming up tomorrow. Papa's perspective today with Joe Buck, right? That's not up yet. And then late tomorrow, it'll be our preview. I have Dear Orlando Ledbetter, who's really the best Falcons beat reporter out there from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He'll join me. We're going to have Drew Lock, the Giants starting quarterback, this week on the Giants Huddle podcast. Make sure you check that out as well. Good job, Pearson. For Citacular, I'm Schmeelk. We'll see you next time on Big Blue Kickoff Live, 12:30 on Friday.